Okay, welcome back to GTF Tips, episode number 3. Today we're going to talk about nutrition. Specifically, should you or should you not count calories? So, right out the gate, I'm going to go ahead and say I don't think you should, at least not for the long term, although maybe it might work for some shorter term purposes, especially to retrain your brain and your portion size understanding. But I'm going to talk to you about why I think it's generally not a great idea. I'm not going to focus on the practical stuff today, as in how long it takes to count calories, shoving your stuff into a macro calculator like MyFitnessPal or any of those kinds of apps, really. I know there's sort of 3 or 4 out there that are quite popular, or doing the traditional calculations. And here's why. So let's talk about energy balance. Energy balance is all the calories that go in versus all the calories that go out. If those two numbers balance, you'll stay the same weight. More in than out, you'll gain weight. More out than in, you'll lose weight. In theory, that's great. Measuring either end is really difficult, and here's why. Food labels. Food labels are only written within tolerances, therefore they are approximations and not exact when it comes to the number of calories. If you Google foods because they don't have labels, fruits and vegetables or meat off the meat counter, for example, there will be variations. There will be variations depending on where the crops were grown, depending on the diet of the animal that was slaughtered, which farm it came from, all kinds of stuff, and also where it lived in the world. Also, there are variations depending on how you've stored it. So if you freeze it, you can change the caloric makeup of food. If you've cooked it different ways, that can vastly change the caloric makeup of food also. Also, when you make a meal, you can calculate it down to the calorie, or at least you think you are doing, using the ingredients list, and then you'll leave a bit around the edge of the bowl, or maybe you'll eat a bit extra while you're making, and those calories always go missing. So when you're trying such an exact science, but with such approximations, it's a recipe for disaster. That's what goes in. What about what goes out? Okay, different foods take different amounts of energy to digest. It's called the thermic effect of food. For example, it takes more energy to digest protein than it does carbohydrates. But within each of those food groups, it also varies depending on the type of carbohydrate or the amino acid makeup of the protein. There are tables for all of that, but if you want to dig them out and calculate that for every food, and it gets really complex as well, that's just not practical on a daily basis. So here's what I'm going to suggest instead. Hunger appetite is mainly controlled by 2 hormones, leptin and ghrelin. They kind of trade off against each other. Hormones often work in pairs. Insulin and glucagon are another quite famous pair, or epinephrine and norepinephrine. Leptin and ghrelin are similar. They play off each other. Now, these hormones, the longer we ignore them and suppress them, effectively it comes to the point where we lose sensitivity to them. We need to retrain our appetite. These are pretty accurate. How long as a human race do you think we've been able to measure calories for and known the amounts of calories in common foods? Not very long. We're talking less than 150 years for the vast majority of that, and under 10 years for having it at your fingertips in your own home. A little bit longer if you want to talk about some of the computer options that were available earlier. So, with all of that in mind, how long do you think the vast majority of the human race has been obese for? Quite a recent problem, but yeah, we've got the technology. So I don't want to get into the whole are calories in, calories out the right way to go. We know that as a measurement, in theory, in a textbook, it's perfectly sound logic. But in reality, in your own home on a daily basis, it's not. And here's why. We can get back in tune with what we need to eat pretty easily. Depending on who you are, how out of tune you are, your lifestyle, and a buttload of other factors, depends on how long this is going to take. However, initially you're going to be hungry. Why? Because you've adjusted your food downwards. So if you adjust your quantity of food downwards, which by the way is the much easier way around than adjusting your exercise upwards, although a small compensation in the opposite direction will help. Your natural instinct is going to be hunger because you're used to getting more food. However, over time, your hormones will start doing their job again, or more to the point, the hormones are still doing the job. You will become sensitive to those hormone signals again, and you'll start to learn the difference between a craving and hunger, because a lot of what you experience in the early days will be cravings. So, advice, real steps that you can take. The easiest one is to reduce your portion size. So, say for argument's sake, you eat 3 meals and 2 snacks every day. Rather than cutting out a whole snack or cutting out a whole meal, cut each meal and snack size down by 10%. Regardless of the makeup of your food, i.e. the split of macronutrients, the quality of your food, etc., what you've done straight away is skim 10% of the calories. Tip number 2, a little bit more focus on veg will fill you up more. Okay, anything that's high in fiber will fill you up. Tip number 3, eat more protein. Obviously, I want you to eat great sources of protein, organic, lean meats. However, let's be realistic, they're not always available, they're not always affordable, so let's just start with eat more protein. Animal proteins, of course, will give you a complete protein source. It's much harder to do if you choose vegetarian or vegan friendly sources. However, it is possible, just make sure you do your research. Tip number 4, slow down when you eat. These signals that tell us we're full take a little bit of time. They're a little bit slow, especially if you're wolfing your food down. Just slow down. You might actually realize you're full, and that might do you a favor. Tip number 5, and this is my personal favorite. I have to do this. If you don't finish what's on your plate, it's not a crime. I was raised the opposite way. It's a very difficult barrier for me personally to get over. I hate leaving food, especially if I've paid for it in a restaurant. However, if you are going to leave some food, and you might find yourself needing to do that, take it away, clear it into the bin. Don't leave it next to you because you will graze on it. Anyway, these are just my tips. This is how I think it's more sustainable to get back in tune with your body's signals, to lose weight and eat the right amount sustainably on a daily basis. That doesn't mean that calorie counting is always wrong and can't have any positive results. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm just trying to get across to you some practical tips, advice for you to use on a daily basis. Anyway, let me know if you've got any questions. Let me know if it works for you. Let me know if you give it a go. And I'll see you soon for the next episode.